I appreciate everyone being here today as we look at the new features of Inventor 2022. Cassie and I were just talking. It's amazing that the tool has matured over these years. If you're a new Inventor user, Inventor is right at about its 20-year anniversary. So it's really amazing to see how polished and how amazing the product has grown into. And today we're going to take a look at the new features for the Inventor 2022 release. As Cassie said, my name is Rusty Belcher, and I'll be going through the presentation with you today. There's no doubt about it that Autodesk has worked very, very hard to come up with a very amazing release of the software. Put a lot of time and effort into a lot of little things, but a couple of major points or a couple of major functionalities that are brand new for this particular release. So personally, I want to thank Autodesk for the obvious work that they've put into the tool for this particular release. Today's presentation, we're going to focus on about 6 different points, and a lot of these points honestly tend to blend into each other. So as we go through them, you might see a few points that are listed twice in 2 different areas. But we're going to start off by looking at the user interface, the changes that have been made there. And then we're going to take a look at what's new in the part modeling and the assembly modeling environments. And the big feature, obviously the big feature of the release is they're called model states. And if you were going to put up what the marquee feature is for Inventor 2022, it would be model states. And we're going to spend some time talking about those and the new functionalities that they bring to the table with Inventor. Then we're going to look at productivity, performance, and interoperability. And I think the big key feature there is a very improved relationship with Inventor and Revit, where we can pass data really back and forth between the 2 tools, work in concert with each other. And I think you'll be impressed with what they've introduced into that particular workflow. A little bit about drawings. So we've got some new stuff in the drawing environment. And then we'll finish up with installation and deployment. We all have to get it onto our computers and get the thing installed. And there are a few new things in that area as well. So I want to start off with the user interface. In Inventor 2021, last year, they introduced a beta feature. It was the dark mode or the dark user interface. And last year when I first saw that, I don't know, I wasn't too impressed. But this year it's now fully integrated into the application, and it is a joy to work with the dark color scheme now. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. There's also a little utility called the Reset UI Layout utility. We'll take a look at that. The text editor received a minor change. We'll talk about that coming up. And there's some additional application options that are new for this release. Well, I mentioned the dark color scheme, and I think it's important to start there. And real quickly, if I were to just minimize my PowerPoint, I've got my Inventor up, and the dark color scheme has been fully integrated. It is now an honest to goodness feature. You should absolutely embrace using it. I can't tell you how much of a difference it has meant to me in the past couple of weeks. I've started to use it. I've started to use it all the time, and I can honestly feel it in my eyes that I'm not looking at a bright screen, and it is a tremendous improvement in just being able to sit in front of the computer even longer, if that makes any sense. But it's fully integrated now. Now, they've still got some work to do on the dark user interface. You're still going to see some windows that don't have the dark color scheme. But as they upgrade those windows in future updates and releases, they will move to the dark color scheme as well. Let me pull up my PowerPoint again. And I mentioned the dark color scheme, and again, it's so nice. And it is now reflected in so many areas, fully into the part environment, fully into the assembly environment. They've even gone so far as to integrate it into the iLogic and the forms that you create from iLogic. So it is at all points in the application, it takes advantage of the dark color scheme. Now, this little reset UI layout, this is pretty important if you are using a laptop and when you're at work, you have it hooked up to multiple monitors. And if you're in that situation, if you ever unhook from your multiple monitors and take your laptop in the field, you know the problems where you have windows that are potentially off the screen on a potentially second monitor that's not available. Well, on the View tab, you're going to find a new command in the Inventor 2022 release called Reset UI Layout, and this puts the Inventor user interface back to the out-of-the-box single window display. Now, it is an all or nothing command, so if you click it and you have some customized ribbons or some customized panel placements, things like that, you're going to lose those. So if you want to get them back, it's important that you export that stuff early on so you keep it in a backup. You can export your layout, you can export that. And then when you get back to the office, you can re-import it and put it back to the way that you like it. Now, I was doing some research because this Reset UI layout is very similar to the Inventor Reset utility, which is still part of the application. So if you need the Inventor Reset utility, you can absolutely still get to that. But if you're inside the application and you want to do basically the same thing, then you can take advantage of that Reset UI layout command. There's also a little enhancement in the application options on the display tab. There's now a way to control multiple document graphics. Now, this is a little thing, but I think most of us have done this in Inventor when you're in an assembly and you drill down into a subcomponent or maybe multiple layers deep into a subcomponent part. And then you want to go about changing the appearance or the visibility of that part. And we know that as you back out into the overall assembly, those changes will follow you. They happen automatically. And that's what this new option on the display tab actually controls. It's the multiple document graphics option, and it's turned on by default. So Inventor will work exactly as it always has in this particular state. But there might be an issue or a certain situation where you want to drill down and change the display of a component without modifying the overall top assembly. And if that's the case, you can come in and turn this option off. All right, that's the user interface. We've taken care of that. Now we want to take a look at what's new in the part modeling environment. I've got a few of them up here on the screen. The fillet command received kind of an overhaul. There's a little bit of different options available in most of the dialogues with the solid or surface toggle. And of course, I mentioned before, the big marquee situation here inside of Inventor 2020, model states come to the part modeling environment. So I want to start off with the fillet command. I think the fillet command is something we all use every day. And I always get a little nervous when Autodesk messes around with one of the very common core commands. But I think if you're an Inventor user, if you've used Inventor at all in the past, you know that they have been systematically going through all the commands, and they've been replacing the classic old dialog boxes with property panels. Well, it's the fillet command's turn this year, and they've replaced the dialogues with the property panels. They've also introduced 3 distinct fillet commands. The fillet command used to be a single command that did just about everything. Now there are 3 commands: the fillet command, the full round fillet, and the face fillet. You're going to see new browser nodes for the full round and face fillets. So there's new iconography in the browser. And there's also a workflow for what happens to your legacy fillets when you go in and update them. If you update them in Inventor 22, they will update to the new iconography. And I want to show you this. I think it's really nice, and it's a wonderful thing to deal with. So I've got a little widget here. I'm going to open this up, and we're going to add some fillets to it. So when I go up to the fillet command, it's exactly where it was before, but when I launch it, you're going to see the properties palette. Now, if there's I don't know, maybe there's two ways of thinking about the properties palette. Do I dock it onto my browser? And that way the browser becomes the interface for the command, or do I float it? And you can go either way. If you're like me and you like to float it, for the most part, that's fine. Get it a little closer to the work. But if you want your browser to become basically your default dialog for all commands, you can dock your properties palette over there. Now, this properties palette has a separate toolbar now. And the separate toolbar kind of docks to the side of the palette, and it controls what particular function or what particular fillet type you want to use while you're using the command. So I want to add some fillets. So I'm just going to come in right now on the little toolbar. I've got it set for edge selection. So I can come in and grab some edges. We can Windows select those. Works pretty good. All right. But I want to do a variable fillet as well, so I can change the type on the fly. And I can come down and add my variable fillet. I can also do my setbacks. I can go to that particular option, click my setback, and in this case, I'm just going to type in a 0.5. Using the tab key on the keyboard, there are shortcuts on the keyboard that allow you to jump back and forth between the cells in the properties panel without having to use the mouse all the time. But you can see that I did all of these fillets in really one command. I click OK. There you go. You see the classic fillet command in the browser. But if I go up to the fillet command and expand it now in Inventor 2022, you're going to see two additional commands. You'll see the separate fillet command for face fillets and the separate command for full round fillets. Now, I don't know how you feel about this, but in my opinion, these two fillets were not very popular. So I really do understand why they broke them out and gave them their own separate command. But if you haven't used these before, the full round fillet command, basically you select three faces. It still works exactly as it always has. All right, you can click the apply button and we can do another one. Very good. And the face fillet, if I were to take the face fillet, I could launch that command and we can add a fillet from one face to another very easily. Now, I mentioned the solid surface toggle. This is a really minor change, but I imagine you guys will see it and run into it. So I do want to cover that. I'm going to sketch on this side face here and just draw a simple little rectangle. We're not going to be too careful about the placement of this. And I'm going to launch the extrude command. So when I launch the extrude command, of course, I see the properties panel appear. Now, in past releases, we all know usually the default for extrusion is a solid body, something either a cut, an intersect, or a joint. And if you want a surface, you usually would go up and you would toggle back and forth between the solid and surface options. You'll now notice there's no solid button up here on the extrusion properties panel. If you want a surface, you simply activate the surface option, you'll get a surface. If you don't want a surface, you'll deactivate the surface option and get a solid. So these are little improvements in the properties panel, but I think it helps, it removes a lot of clutter on the panels, makes them a little more user-friendly, a little easier to understand as you're using the tool. All right, I want to hop back over to my PowerPoint and I want to talk about another part modeling enhancement. And it's important you recognize this as a part modeling enhancement. It's the ability to send your part models to Fusion. There's a new send to Fusion workflow. It is only available at this moment in the part modeling environment. And it allows us to send our parts from Inventor to Fusion. It actually establishes a link through Fusion Team. And, and we can put our parts into Fusion and take advantage of all of the extensions that are over there for CNC machining, for 3D printing, for generative design, for all the great functionality that's available in Fusion. We can now get our Inventor parts over there easily and take advantage of that. Now, if I wanted to send my particular part here to Fusion, I would go over here to the Environments tab. That's where you're going to find this new command, send to Fusion. Again, if you were to launch this, it would allow you to take your part, get it into Fusion, and maybe generate some tool pathing. I'm not going to finish this, but it would say, hey, if you're going to do this, you'd have to save the file. But then it would launch a side dialog, which you could go through and link your part to its counterpart onto the Fusion side. It does maintain a link, but it's not a dynamic link. If you want to update the Fusion side of it, you'll need to re-export your Inventor side. So if something changes in Inventor, you'll have to re-export it to the Fusion side and then pick up the design changes from there. Now I'm going to cancel that, but that's where you'll find the send to Fusion command. All right, here we go with part modeling and model states. Now, I'll be honest with you, there is a lot here. Model states are really the big new functionality in Inventor part modeling and Inventor assembly modeling. And I'll be honest, the past week preparing for this demonstration, I've had to adjust this slide like 15, 20 times because I keep coming up with something else that we can do with model states. And this is not everything. If you look at the small print here, I apologize for that, but it's a very powerful new feature. So what are model states? All right, it's the ability for you to save different states of the model for various reasons. I'm going to go through a few of these bullet points here, but really important, you can create a saved state of the model and suppress features per whatever state you want to save. You can also change parameters per state. You can also establish iProperties for each state that you create. I read, or I looked at one of the guys at Autodesk has a blog, and I looked at it, and he put it this way: it's basically everything iParts can do, except it does it in a single document workflow all the way down here at the end. You're going to hear me say that so many times when I talk about model states. All of this functionality now happens within one file. It saves you so many extraneous files on your disk, and it makes your data management a lot easier when it comes to this kind of information. You can edit the data as you create multiple model states. You can absolutely edit them via spreadsheet, and a lot of times that's going to be the smart way to deal with it. I put it this way, and in looking at this, it's like having level of detail now at the part level. So I can now create, basically create levels of detail, or I can change the level of fidelity of my design at the part level and easily go back and forth between the different levels. Maybe I want a highly detailed level, a medium level, or a coarse level of fidelity. This happens a lot when you send your models over to FEA for analysis. You end up turning off certain features. Well, we can now establish model states to do that in the same file. It works right alongside of the design views that are already there. You'll see up here in this little graphic, I don't know if you can see it, but the model states show up as another folder in your part modeling browser. This allows you to do things like show independent steps in a manufacturing process. We can save a state at each step along the way of the design. We can show weldment prep and machining prep now at the single part level. That's interesting. We can also document the sheet metal folding strategy of a component by saving the state at each fold. This gives us the ability to create multiple versions of a part or multiple configurations of a part. You can also use it as a benchmark where I can say, hey, lock the design down at this point, make it a state, and then I can explore different scenarios downstream. And if I don't like it, I can simply delete that and go back to the previous state. It is fully supported already with iLogic and the Inventor API. So if you want to take this into iLogic and start to utilize it there, absolutely works. And I want you to remember that it's a single file workflow. Now, I do want to show you a little bit of this. So I'm going to open up a file here. And this is an impeller. And of course, the impeller we create has different vanes or different numbers of vanes. And each situation with the number of vanes requires us traditionally to create an independent standalone Inventor part. Even though it's the same design, I have to document this right now with multiple files. Well, in Inventor 2022, I only have to create one file. And in that file, I can establish model states. If I come up to my model states dropdown, you can see that I can easily jump back and forth between states and change the number of vanes on the impeller. Now there's so much more in the background. If I right click on any of these, I can go to iProperties. Each of these states has independent iProperty control. So if I go to this particular project tab, the description lists this one as having 14 blades. If I go to the next one on the list, go to iProperties, you can see that this one has a different name and it has 10 blades. And this is very, very easy to use. It's not difficult to use this at all. I mentioned iLogic, that iLogic is already built into this. So if I go to my iLogic browser, I have a form. This particular part has a form built into it. And here we've integrated the model states so that in the form, I can choose the size of the component I want, and it updates accordingly. This is going to be tremendous for parts like this impeller, but also in the factory design utilities. This is going to be amazing that I can create incredibly functional assets now and have tables that really drastically change the overall design of the component. All right, I want to close this one out. And I want to keep going with this idea of saving states. So here's another example where you would use model states in a part to define the manufacturing process. For instance, I have my master state. So this, this would be the typical default state that you work on as you're designing a part. But I might want to show it in this particular case as a cast. So this is the part as it looks like as it's cast. And then I can double click and use the machined option. So after we machine the two faces, this might be the part that I send over to Fusion so that I can use Fusion to generate the G code necessary for the toolpaths to cut the components out. But I can also show it after it's been drilled, and I can also show it after it's been machined and finished to its final form. And again, all of this is inside the same part file, one document. You might be thinking, what happens when I go to do a drawing? When you go to do a drawing view, you get to choose which state you want to display in your drawing. So you can fully document on your drawing all the different machining states of your components. This is something that in the past has been reserved for like weldments and the weldment assembly type. Well, now we can do the same functionality inside of an Inventor part, a single Inventor part file. Well, I wanted to show you doing model states from scratch in a part file. So I'm going to open up this one. Here's an example of, it's part of the class. We actually have a class on Inventor 2022 and the what's new inside of that, and 2021. It's a class that was developed by Imagine It, by the Ascent group. Actually, I'm looking forward to teaching it. I've been digging into that class all week, and it really has helped me to get ready for this presentation. But this is a regular Inventor part file at the moment. There are no model states in this part file. And I want to create a couple. You create model states just like you create views or positional reps. It's a very similar functionality. I can right click up here and select new. And this creates a new one. And then you can do this little slow double click to change the name. So I'm just going to call this short. I'm going to copy it so I can make a second one. I'm going to rename this one to medium. And I'll copy this again. And I'll call this one long. So on the short version, that's got the check mark beside it. I'm going to go to my parameters. Model states allow me to affect the parameters on a per state basis. I have a parameter for the length of this part, and I'm going to reduce this current one by 20 millimeters. There we go. So 164, I'll hit enter for that. You see the part shrink up there. There we go. We're going to leave the medium one. The medium one will be the one that was default. So I'm going to jump over to the long one now. I just double click it, make it the active one. And then I can go to the parameter table there. And let me bump that up 20 millimeters. So it gets longer. It is very, very simple and straightforward to do this manually. So now, I could double click short to show you the short version. I could double click the medium version, or I could double click the long version. Some of you might have come to training with Imagine It before, and you might recognize this functionality as what we can do with iParts. And you're right, you're absolutely right. There is a lot of overlap with what model states do and what iParts do. If you're an iPart user, you need to understand this, that model states and iParts are mutually exclusive. You can only use one workflow in an Inventor file. You can't use both. So if you want to continue using iParts, knock yourself out. They still work. They still work fine. But if you want to take advantage of model states, then you cannot have iPart functionality in your file. If you do, the model states are disabled. Now, model states do so many different things. Just as a little example, if I go to my short stage here, I could come up and change my my property for material to copper cast. And then if I come and double click the long state, I'll come in and give this one an iron cast. Now it only works for the material because the material is part of the I properties of the component. But now, I could show you the short version, the medium version, and the long version. So now we're getting into the idea of having a configurator built in at the part level, which is, again, another great functionality for the design. Now, anything that you've changed, all right, as you make certain changes, anything you change, you can modify via spreadsheet. So I right click on the model states, I can select edit via spreadsheet, I'll click OK. Excel opens up and everything you've done will be listed here. Everything you've changed is listed in the dialog automatically. So if you wanted to make a new version, you absolutely could just by filling out the next available cell. That spreadsheet saves as you close and you're ready to go. So I hope you see or catch a glimpse here of some of the possibilities that model states bring to the table. Now, again, I'm going to close for time's sake. We can't go through all of these. We just can't. There's just not enough time. It's almost as if we need a whole new webinar on like the top 20 things you can do with model states. But we want to move on because there's a lot of other good functionality available here. I want to take a look at assemblies. All right, so we're leaving the part environment. We're going to jump into the assembly environment. And there's a couple of neat things here that are new. You can now see the constraint state of your components in the browser. There's new symbols that appear on the parts, and they let you know what the state of your constraints are. If they're fully constrained, you'll see a solid dot. If they're under constrained, you'll see a circle. This is going to help you easily find the parts that are under constrained when you're doing an analysis of an assembly. Now, personally, my favorite feature is the next one, instance properties. You're going to see that in a second. This allows us to give unique information to an instance of a file. Even though we've used it multiple times in the assembly, we can give that instance iProperty information. The simplify workflow, it has now replaced shrink wrap. I can tell you shrink wrap is gone. Shrink wrap, there is no more shrink wrap command in Inventor. But don't worry, because all of that functionality has been rolled into the updated simplify command. And of course, model states. Model states are now at the assembly level. So the constraint states in the browser, I hope I'll have an assembly open in a moment and I can show you this, but you have an option in to update older files to show this. There's a little hamburger menu on the browser. You can click that and you can actually choose the option to show constraint states. Now, this option is automatically on in the new templates that are available with Inventor 2022. There's also an option, again, under the little hamburger menu, there's also an option to hide the components that are fully constrained. And again, if you're trying to lock down where your files or possible motion or possible movement is available, it might help you to hide the fully constrained components. Instance properties. I mentioned that this is a favorite one of mine. I learned about instance properties in the factory design utilities. I work with the factory design utilities a lot. And quite often in the factory design side of things, you have the same machine that is placed multiple times in a facility. It's exactly the same machine. So why would I want to model it more than once? Well, we're all good CAD users. So we know we should model the part one time and then copy paste it into different locations in the final assembly. But in the world of manufacturing and the world of preventative maintenance, each of those machines gets a unique number or some kind of unique identification. On the factory side of it, we call them brass tags or an asset tag. That, yes, it's the same machine as it is the one next door to it, but this is an individual component, and all of the preventative maintenance, scheduling, the purchasing, all of that information goes to this particular device. Well, we can now do that within Inventor. Hopefully I'll get a chance to show you that in a minute. And then, well, let me show you that first, and then we'll come back to the model states. I want to show you the instance properties. So I'm going to hop into an assembly file real quick. This is an assembly I have. It's a water plant. I built it in context of a point cloud, so it's going to turn that off. But quite often in an assembly, we know that this is the same exact pump. We only want to model it one time. But yes, we're going to have to use it multiple times in context of an assembly. Well, we need to give these pumps a unique identifier, and now we can. I'm going to select these three pumps, and I'm going to right-click in the background. and you'll see a new entry on the browser called Instance Properties. I so want to call this Occurrence Properties, but the official name is Instance Properties. And it brings up a single tab. It looks like it comes right out of the iProperties, the custom iProperties, but this allows you to create a custom instance property. So I'm going to create one called Install Code. And I'm just going to add it. I'm going to add it to all three of them at the moment. And we'll click OK. Now, I can go to each one of them in turn now, go to Instance Properties on the individual element, and I can say, hey, the install code for this one is 11A. That's the unique identifier for that particular part. Okay, I can do the same thing over here. I can go to Instance Properties, and this one will be 11B. I'll modify that and click OK. I'll leave the third one alone for a minute. Now, when I go to my bill of materials, all right, I'm going to enable my structured bill of material. And as I scroll down, you'll see that right now, Inventor is rolling up the items for this pump. It says I have one pump, but I have quantity of 3. Well, that's basically typical. But in this particular case, I don't want that. I'm going to unmerge those. We'll click OK. And then I need to add another cell, so I can come over here and I'm going to add a custom property called Install Code. Click OK. So now as I come over, you'll see that I've got the install codes for my pumps, and I can actually fill in the third one here, 11C. Now, there's a lot of things we could do. The bill of materials here are so versatile, but let's say that I wanted to merge these back up again. Now that the install code's there, you'll see that as it comes down in your bill of material, it says it varies. But that's okay. Let's do a drawing real quick. Let's go to File, New. I'm going to go into a standard drawing file. I'm just going to drop in a drawing view for time's sake. We're just going to keep this really quick. We'll click OK. Now, I could put in my bill of materials. I really should, but my bill of materials are going to be very, very long. So I'm going to skip that and go right to the balloons, and I'm going to start ballooning this. So there's my item 54. There's another item 54, which is how I want it to show in my bill of material. Now I'm going to right click and I'm going to change my balloon style, and I'm going to add that install code to the balloon. So when my dialog appears, I can come in and go to my column chooser. We'll do a new property. We'll call it install code. All right. I'll move that up. And I'll change my balloon to a split balloon. So there you go. So now I see each item with its common item number, but its separately individual installation code. That functionality has been needed inside of Inventor for ages and ages. We've had it inside of the factory design utilities for quite a while, almost since the beginning of the factory utilities, but now it's part of the Inventor assembly environment on its own. All right, got so much to show you and such little time left, so I want to keep on going here. Model states for assemblies. All right, so if you can remember iParts, remember how I said that at the part level, model states do everything that iParts would do. Well, at the assembly level, model states do everything that iAssemblies would do. But on top of that, they completely replace the old level of detail. So the old level of detail workflow is gone. They've taken that out and they've replaced it with model states. Now, don't worry. All of your old levels of detail are going to automatically convert to model states. If you have iLogic code that was based upon the level of detail functionality, I think for the most part, you're going to see that that iLogic functionality rolls over automatically and works directly with the model states. We've had our iLogic, we've had our programmers already confirm that quite a bit with a couple of different projects. And they just released I think a blog post about how iLogic and model states work. But again, there are so many different things that open up different possibilities. A model state can control component suppression, just like old levels of detail. Model states can control the model states of subcomponents. Remember, our part files might have model states. Well, the assembly can call for different model states from individual components. On top of that, it can control parameters and individual eye properties per state. It can also control constraints per state. This is kind of overlaps into the positional reps that we saw earlier, or that's part of Inventor. This brings about assembly configurations. This brings up weldment preparations that you can display and document, manufacturing stages, alternate assembly positions. I mentioned everything iAssemblies could do, model states can do, everything LOD or levels of detail could do or used to do, this does. This brings about substitute model states. So I can generate a simplified substitute to so a single body can represent hundreds of components in an assembly. The bill of material is fully supported. So even if you turn parts on and off, your bill of material is going to apply the correct quantities. Again, you edit via spreadsheet if you need it. And of course, iLogic support is here if you need it. And again, the kicker, everything happens in a single file workflow. Now, this is going to be a very simple example of a model state in an assembly. But I've got a model state up here, and this one's already done, so it won't take long to take a look at this. But here is my model state. I've got some arms that transition up and down based on a belt and a motor, and I've got these arms have these suction cups, probably to hold on to a box or something along those lines as it's moving stuff in and out of a particular machine or area. Now, it's the arms in question with this particular design. So I have a model state that has no arms. Maybe we have a completely different set of arms that we need to consider applying to this base state of the assembly. Well, we could do that now without losing any work and without creating any additional files. But I can easily put the two arms back. I can increase the suction cup count to 3. All right, so we have different arms for that, or 4. And in the background, all it's doing down here in the background is it's suppressing certain components and turning certain components back on, or it's adjusting the patterns of certain components. It's also at this point where I could show you easily in the browser where my constraint sets are, my constraint states are showing here. But model states are so much more powerful than what we have time to discuss today. If you go away from the event today, and the big question about model states, if you can get it in your mind that they replace levels of detail, that's great, but understand that they also duplicate the functionality of iAssemblies and iParts, but with a single document workflow. Take that message away with you, and then on top of that is so many more opportunities that are available to us with model states now. All right, assemblies. Sticking with assemblies, the simplification environment has been greatly enhanced. They've taken the shrink wrap command out. They have enhanced with a properties palette or a properties panel, the simplification tool. So now the single simplification tool does everything that shrink wrap did, but it also gives you all the functionality of the old simplify workflows. You will find this available at the part and the assembly level. So you can simplify single parts. There is a workflow for that. But for the most part, we kind of associate simplification at the assembly level. And you guys know why you simplify. You might be wanting to remove intellectual property. You might be wanting to lighten the load of the model to make it as simple as possible so that you can get it into Revit in a BIM situation or BIM 360. All kinds of options are available here. Now, the new Inventor to Revit workflow, the new and improved Inventor to Revit workflow, I think is a massive step forward in the relationship of Inventor to Revit. It's been possible to do this in the past, but it's never been easier to do it than it is today. The workflows now support BIM and completely Revit. You can literally, with Inventor, you can save files as Revit families. So that's a huge step forward. But again, that simplification process I mentioned earlier comes to the forefront so that we can utilize simplification in this process to send lighter models over to Revit. Along the lines of that, we have new interoperability. We have the ability to export our product model information. We have the ability to run JT files through the task scheduler. Been very, very nice to do that. Now, I'm going to try my best to play a simple little video here. You might hear some of the noise, but I wanted you to see the Inventor Revit workflows. So we start off here by importing Revit models into Inventor. We do this in the factory utilities all the time. Now we go in and we build a factory layout, and then I need to take this factory layout and get it back over into Revit. We use the simplify command for that. So the new simplified dialog allows me to go in and adjust hide all the parts, adjust the visibility of all the parts, the fidelity of the overall design. I can simplify that. And then at the end of the day, I can save it as a Revit component. So here's the output type to RVT. And then at the end of the day, I can also save all of these presets. So the next time I have to do this, I don't have to set up the dialog. I can just go to the preset and select it. You can also use this to generate simplified envelopes for complex designs. And then when I open them in Revit, I can take advantage of the entire Inventor bill of material inside of the Revit environment. Now here's the model open in Revit. Because we use the same coordinate system for the building and the layout, everything lines up perfectly. And then here's all the data from Inventor being linked into Revit and being documented inside the Revit environment. Really impressive to see the relationship between those two tools get to this particular point. Now, the best of the rest here, productivity and performance, I really do wish we could spend so much time here. You know, for the past few releases, they've been focusing on the graphics and how the graphics are handled on your local computer. And in Inventor 2022, they're sending more and more of these background functions out to your GPU and having better performance from that. So we're utilizing the hardware much better inside of Inventor 2022. And then they take advantage of the new graphics technologies that are available. And I've already mentioned the constraints and some of the other options. I'm not a big fan of graphs, but there are graphs here that talk about the improvements. Oh, sorry, I must have missed that particular part. Oh, okay. But they have documented completely how much faster it is for Inventor to open and close files now. How much faster it is to utilize edges, so shaded with edges or hidden lines with edges. And I think I've got time to share this one with you because this is one that you will notice if you're an Inventor user and you like using edges in your design. I don't know if you noted this, but with the view, if I go to the view tab, I'm using my visual style shaded with edges. And you know, shaded with edges actually takes into account more graphics than just regular shaded. Regular shaded is probably the easiest of the shading modes. And if I were to go to my front view and lift up a little bit here, I could go grab a tool that none of us ever use, the navigation tool, and I could start walking. And now I know you guys are watching this via the internet, but on my side, this is completely fluid. I'm not pausing at all as I walk through this particular design. Now let me rewind for a little bit. Let me go back out to where we were outside the building. There, that's close enough. And let me turn on some of these edges. Yes, shaded with edges would work just fine now, except I just don't, you know, it doesn't look as good in this case as, how about wireframe with hidden edges? So this looks just amazing, and it is just so fluid now because the background computer resources required to do this are being distributed better across your computer GPU. That's something I would encourage all of you to try when you get your Inventor 2022s open. Find your biggest assembly, turn on all the edges, and then start to spin that thing around and see how much better it actually behaves now on your system. All right, we've mentioned a lot of the productivity tools that they have listed here. I want to cover drawings real quick as we come to our end. There's just a few things here that are different, and I think it's important we cover these. Your drawing views, you can now change the lighting style in your drawing, I'm sorry, in your model, and that lighting style will be reflected in your drawing view. Now it's just the lighting style. It's not shadows and reflections. It's just the lighting style. And there's some pretty nice options here now that your dimensions will break center lines. I think that's a really important one. We just don't have a ton of time to show you that. I am going to show you a couple of things. I'm going to open up a part real quick. It's just a single part. And they're using view states here, views, not model states, just regular views. And they've documented the parts. So the front view, they've used the PMI, the product model information, the dimensions, the tolerances, and they've documented these particular views. Looks pretty good. Now, there's a couple of neat little enhancements they've made to the drawing environment that make automated drawing views a lot nicer than they used to be. So I'm going to start a new file here real quick. I'm going to grab a drawing. I'm going to grab this Autodesk 2022 file. And I did that so fast, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to File, New. I'm going to select the Autodesk 2022. This is my new template. And then over here to the side, I've got these preset drawing views. Now, this does take some time to get this set up. Your views have to be named exactly the same in the part and the drawing mode. But when I create this and select my component, it's going to grab all 4 of those views and document them completely ready to go so that all the information shows up on the drawing. That easy. Now, if I look at my part here, the shaded mode on this particular one, it's with shaded modes, I think you'll see this the most. When you double click the view, you'll see a new gear option here right beside design view. This is the enhancement for 2022. This is the ability for you to control whether the camera view or the included 3D annotations show up in the view by default. So you've seen how the 3D annotations come across, but let's take a look at what the design, what the lighting style looks like. So I'm going to go back into my part here, and on the view tab, I'm going to change my lighting style. So right now it's on the default environmentally based lighting, and I'm going to come down to something like one light. I want you to see how you get a drastically different or darker color in that particular case. Well, when I go back over to my drawing, you'll notice that that dark color populates onto the view automatically. Now, again, it's just the environmental lighting. It is not the shadows or the reflections. I wish Autodesk would get the shadows into our drawing views. I don't know whether we could ever use them or not in production, but I've always wanted that. But it's not available at this particular point. But the lighting style is nice, and it allows us to change the different ways the colors look in our shaded view. All right, best of the rest. I really have to talk about, just real quickly, you'll notice a few more options with installations and deployments. Of course, Autodesk is moving to a named user account, and you're going to see that the installation and deployments can now take advantage of that. I think you're going to see that they're much more streamlined, making the choices to create a deployment. You do this online. You go to your Autodesk accounts page. If you whatever software you have there or have privileges to there, you can generate your deployments there in a very streamlined little fashion. Choose what versions of Inventor and Vault to plug in and to install. Choose what background files to include. And then when you execute it, it basically creates a bootstrapper file that when you bring it down to your file, it will build the deployment on your local machine that you can share amongst the users at your facility. I would encourage you, if you are looking for more information about the deployment, to really look at Autodesk.com, look at some of the explore some of the YouTube videos about this. It is really interesting, but it's not going to really fit in a demonstration like we're doing today here. So as I finish up, I wanted to give you just a few places to take a look, some additional resources. And honestly, there's no way I could share with you in an hour everything that's new with Inventor 2022. I think we covered a lot of it, but Ascent does have a class. We do have a class at Imagine It, if you're interested, where we can take a deep dive into all of the new features available in Inventor 2022 and Inventor 2021. Our new update class is ready to go, and I really do want to give a special thanks to the folks at Ascent for helping me. They provided me the book and the class content to prepare for this demonstration today, and it made a world of difference. But of course, if you go into Inventor and if you want to go to the Getting Started tab, and there's the What's New, this will take you to the Autodesk Help. It'll take you directly to what's new for Inventor 2022, and you can explore the new features here as well. And you can also do the highlight. This is something that's pretty interesting. You can click the highlight tool and tell it to highlight things on the ribbon and the property panels. And then you get these little markers here, so you can go in and you can find the new features and the things that are new from the previous releases. Well, our hour has slipped by. I want to finish up by letting you all know that we have a major virtual event coming up. I definitely want to give that a plug. It's something that I'm personally working on, and it is aimed at elevating your business, your processes, and your people into this new digital world that we all live in. I think it's going to be an amazing event. It's going to happen over a couple of days, and you'll be able to come in and take a path and explore what these new digital alternatives look like and how you can best take advantage of those. So look for the information coming up about this Elevate virtual event. This is all sponsored by Imagine It, and look forward to being part of that. I'm gonna do a part of that with the factory design utilities and generating that digital replica of your factory and how that can help you make better design decisions and better business decisions overall. So again, I want to thank really the folks at Autodesk for a fantastic version with the Inventor 2022. And I do want to open it up for any questions that you guys might have.